Unit 19, Economic Inequality. In this chapter, we talk about A. Trends in inequality, B. Types of inequality, C. Evaluating inequality, D. Explaining inequality, E. Addressing inequality. We start by stating the trends in economic inequality within and between countries, types and sources of inequality. Then we discuss when and how inequality should be addressed. Trends in inequality. Understand the difference between the terms wealth, market income, and disposable income. Wealth refers to net worth, i.e., difference between a person's assets and liabilities accumulated over a period of time. Market income refers to annual income from wages, businesses, and investments. Disposable income refers to market income minus taxes and transfers. Wealth is much more unequally distributed than market income, which is more unequally distributed than disposable income, as indicated by the height of the bars indicating the Gini coefficient for each of these measures of income. The blue bars for wealth are the tallest, showing the highest value of the Gini coefficient, a measure of income inequality. Gini coefficient lies between 0 and 1. 0 indicates perfect equality and 1 shows perfect inequality. Therefore, higher Gini coefficient indicates greater inequality. The differences among the three measures of inequality are much smaller in Japan than in Sweden and the US. More equality in disposable income can be due to the tax and transfer system. Sweden has much lower disposable income inequality than the other two countries. This is due to its relatively modest inequality in earnings and, more importantly, to its system of taxes and transfers, which benefits the less well-off. It is not due to greater equality in Sweden's distribution of wealth. As you can see from the graph, wealth is distributed almost as unequally in Sweden as in the US. Trends in inequality across countries. The charts show what happened to the income share of the top 1% over the years 1910 to 2015. There are cross-country differences in the level of inequality, but also common trends. Example, a fall in inequality over 1920 to 1980 because of the Great Depression, which affected the rich more than the poor. The two world wars, unionization of employees, passing of fair labor standard laws. Countries differed greatly in what happened after 1980 though. In countries like the US, Argentina, UK, China, and India, inequality started to increase, while it continued to fall in countries like Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands. Global inequality. Blue line shows Gini coefficient for the entire world. It shows global inequality among all individuals in the world. If we line up all the individuals in the world from poorest to the richest and calculate the Gini coefficient over time, we find it was very high at 0.69 in 2003, but this has fallen very recently. The other series, the red line, presents global inequality in a different way. It focuses on the income differences between countries. Imagine that everyone in each country earned the average income for that country. In this thought experiment, everyone in the UK would earn exactly the UK's average income, whereas everyone in China would earn exactly the Chinese average income. What would income inequality look like in this hypothetical example? The red line shows the result of performing this calculation. In our thought experiment, the only source of inequality in the world would be inequality across countries. Inequality is reduced, but substantial inequalities still exist due to vast differences in income between countries. The decline in between-country inequality accelerated as the growth of the world's largest poor countries, China and India, took off. But inequality within countries, including China and India, increased. Within country inequality. Increasing inequality within most countries is associated with the changing distribution of jobs. Chart shows total projected job growth 2014 to 2024, thousands of employees. The missing middle is evident. Job growth is highest in the top fifth and bottom fifth of occupations in the US by mean annual earnings. Missing middle means low-paying and high-paying jobs are increasing in number while middle-income jobs are becoming scarcer, leading to increasing income inequality within the US. Types of inequality. Categorical inequality. Categorical inequality, group inequality, refers to economic differences among people who are treated as different categories, usually based on accidents of birth, country of citizenship. Passports and borders limit access to certain economic opportunities. Gender or ethnic group. Example, income disparities between men and women with the same level of education. Figure shows categorical inequality by looking at schooling and lifetime earnings for men and women in the US. Income disparities between men and women among otherwise similar individuals are one measure of this inequality. Figure shows the expected lifetime earnings, labor income, of men and women in the US who work full-time from the time they leave school until retirement. As a result, any differences in the figure are not due to women having more time out of the labor force, on average because of child rearing. Because the quality of schooling does not differ between males and females on average, and girls tend to do as well on most tests, the gender differences in pay are not due to differences in cognitive ability or quality of schooling. Yet, for every level of schooling, women can expect to earn much less than men. Inherited inequality. Intergenerational inequality. The extent to which differences in parental generations are passed on to the next generation. Intergenerational transmission process takes many forms. Inheriting parents' wealth, inheriting parents' genetic makeup, parental influence on growth. The graph shows the intergenerational mobility in two countries, US and Denmark. In the US, a child born in the poorest 20% of families has a 40% chance of remaining in the lowest 20% of income earners as an adult, and has 7.4% chance of moving up to the richest 20% of income earners as an adult. Blue bar shows child in poorest 20%. Purple bar shows child in richest 20%. Vertical axis, height of bar, shows proportion of children in earnings quintile conditional on father's earnings quintile. In Denmark, a child born in a family in the poorest 20% of income earners will have a 25% chance of remaining in that quintile as an adult and a 16.7% chance of being in the richest quintile as an adult. In the US, a child born in the richest quintile has a 9.8% chance of ending up in the poorest 20% of income earners as an adult and a 36% chance of staying in the top 20th percentile. In Denmark, a child born in a family in the richest 20% of income earners has a 16.1% chance of being in the bottom 20% as an adult and a 33.7% chance of staying in the top 20%. The numbers show there is much more intergenerational inequality in the US than in Denmark. Relation to cross-sectional inequality. Inequality in earnings tends to be positively correlated with intergenerational inequality. The graph shows the relationship between cross-sectional inequality on the vertical axis measured using Gini coefficient and intergenerational inequality on horizontal axis measured using intergenerational elasticity. Countries with high intergenerational inequality, such as US and UK, also have higher inequality today. Possible reasons. Societies with strong culture of fairness tend to have policies that reduce cross-sectional inequality and promote intergenerational mobility. Effects of good or bad shocks, luck, are passed on to the next generation, contributing to cross-sectional inequality. Evaluating inequality. How much inequality is too much? Inequality becomes a problem if there is too much of it. Example, in the US, actual wealth inequality is much higher than what people estimate it to be, which is also higher than the ideal wealth distribution. People's ideal wealth distribution depends on income, but these differences are small in comparison. When asked about ideal wealth distribution, people feel that it would be ideal if the top 20% of wealth holders had about 30% of the wealth, while the poorest 20% had about 15%. This differs slightly for people earning over $50,000 and those earning over $100,000. When asked what they think the actual distribution is, they estimate that 20% have about 60% of the wealth and bottom 20% have 5% of the wealth. Actual wealth distribution is more unequal than what people feel is ideal or think it is. Top 20% wealth holders have over 80% of the total wealth in the economy, while bottom 20% have almost a negligible amount. When is inequality unfair? Opinions about whether inequality is unfair depends largely on individual beliefs about how distributions came about. Recall Procedural Justice Unit 5. Many people think categorical inequality is unfair and should be addressed, but not inequality based on hard work or taking risks. Chart shows how beliefs about what it takes to get ahead predict whether people in the US support or oppose government programs to redistribute income to the poor. Christina Fong, an economist, wanted to know if people in the US think this way when it comes to their political support or opposition to policies to raise the incomes of the poor financed by general taxation. She found that a person who thinks that hard work and risk-taking are essential to economic success is much less likely to support redistribution to the poor than one who thinks that the key to success is inheritance, being white, your connections, or who your parents are. Explaining inequality, sources. An individual's income depends on 1. His/her endowments, facts about an individual that may affect his or her income, example wealth, physical assets, human capital. 2. The value of each item in his/her endowment. Technology and institutions affect the value of particular endowments. Both institutions and technologies are part of the explanation of differing endowments among individuals. Inherited wealth can give someone a valuable asset, while subsidized Higher education may help another person qualify as a medical technician. Both are examples of the effect of institutions on endowments. Technology matters too. Being physically strong was a valuable endowment in agriculture, at least until mechanization made it less important in determining earnings. In that case, a change in technology, mechanization, reduced the demand for a particular kind of skill, and so its value relative to other skills fell. The value of land, for example, will depend on how productive it is in growing marketable crops, technology, and whether it is zoned for commercial or residential uses. Institutions. Economic inequality sources. Economic inequality is due to changes in institutions, technology, and differences in endowments. Economic inequality can also influence institutions and policies in future periods. Example, political advantages for the rich as well as technology. Example, automation due to minimum wage introduction. Economic inequality over time. The red arrows show that economic inequality in one period has effects on technologies, institutions, and policies, and differences in endowments in the future. Economic inequality sources. Differences in endowments affect the balance of power in interactions. In principal-agent relationships, the principal can exercise power over agents, but not vice versa. The employer, the owner, or the manager, who is the principal in the labor market, has the power to determine what the firm will produce, using what technology, and in which country to locate production. They also have the power to set the wage and the tasks that a worker is directed to perform, and can also fire the worker. The worker chooses how to go about her work within limits that the employer sets. Differences in endowments also determine the ability to become the principal or the agent. Example, the ability to borrow, lend. Like the relationship between the employer and employee, the other principal-agent models we have seen reflect the unequal relationships between groups of people with different endowments, such as landlords and tenant farmers, and borrowers and lenders. Horizontal arrows indicate a principal-agent relationship. Lenders and employers are the principals in the figure. Their common red color indicates this similarity. Agents, successful borrowers and employees, are colored green to distinguish them from would-be agents, credit market excluded and unemployed, who are colored purple. You definitely do not want to be in the purple boxes. But even if you are an agent lucky enough to be in one of the green boxes, the principal can put you back in the purple box just by refusing to deal with you. This is why lenders and employers have power over borrowers and employees. Now we look at the effect on inequality of 1. An increase in the educational level of the workforce. 2. A reduction in discrimination against a segment of the workforce. And 3. Automation of production, reducing the demand for some skills and increasing others. Example number 1. Worker productivity rises. Productivity can rise if the entire workforce is better educated. Example, an increase in the compulsory schooling age. At the pre-existing real wage, the result of higher productivity will be a higher profit for the firms. With higher profits, new firms enter and existing firms hire additional workers, which reduces the unemployment rate. Lower unemployment in turn makes it easier for a dismissed worker to find a new job. It therefore increases the worker's reservation position, raising the wage. Workers will both possess a better, higher productivity endowment of labor time and enjoy better prices for their endowment. Lorentz curve shifts closer to the line of perfect equality. Unemployment falls from 10% to 5%. 85% of the population that is employed gets 60% of the total income, and 10% of population who are owners, employers, get 40% of all income. Gini coefficient falls from 0.36 to 0.33. Inequality falls. Example number 2. Labor market segmentation. Primary labor market has good jobs with high wages, job security, and trade unions. Secondary labor market has short-term contracts, limited wages, and job security. Eliminating segmentation raises average wages, reducing inequality. Graph shows 40 workers in the secondary labor segment of the market receiving just 10% of the economy's output. The 40 workers in the primary labor market receive half of the output. They are paid 5 times as much as the secondary workers. The 10 owners receive 40% of the output. They are paid 16 times as much as the secondary workers. As a result of elimination of labor market segmentation, all 80 workers now receive the same pay and as a whole receive 60% of the output of the economy. The secondary workers' wages have risen while the primary sector workers' wages have fallen. Gini coefficient falls from 0.52 to 0.36 in this example. In countries where trade unions have reduced labor market segmentation and narrowed the wage differentials among workers, inequality is lower. An example is the so-called solidarity wage policy introduced in Sweden in the 1950s. Example number 3. Automation. Automation. Technologies that allow machines to do the work that people used to do. New technology increases demand for some skills and reduces demand for others. In the short run, machines replace routine labor, increasing unemployment. Workers whose skills are complementary earn higher wages, increasing inequality. The Lorenz curve before the introduction of the robots, the solid blue Lorenz curve shows the distribution of income among the unemployed employees and owners. All workers, whether doing routine or non-routine work, earn the same wage. The effect of the robots on inequality. The introduction of robots polarizes the labor market and increases the Gini coefficient from 0.38 to 0.53. Example number 3. Automation. In the long run, there are two opposing effects on wages and employment. 1. Higher unemployment reduces workers' reservation option, lowering the wage that firms have to set. 2. But an increase in productivity increases profits, which motivates and finances capital expansion, which in turn creates new jobs and reduces unemployment, increasing the wage. Policies can help the transition process. Opportunities for displaced workers to upgrade their skills, job opportunities, and higher wages in non-routine sectors. Addressing unfair inequality. Government policies can influence economic inequality by redistribution, taxes and transfers to reduce differences in disposable income and expenditure on public services. Predistribution, greater equality of endowments. Example, property redistribution or raising the value of endowments of the poor via legislation. Example, statutory minimum wage for specific types of workers. Watch the two following videos in your textbook. https://youtube//99ZTPN5R3MK. In this video, Arun Dubey, an economist, studied differential changes in minimum wages in bordering local areas in the US. In the Economist in Action video, he explains that he found that raising the minimum wage had a little negative impact on employment but increased the income of poorer workers on average. https:// YouTube X83GK4PVLRC. In this video, James Heckman, a Nobel Prize-winning economist from the University of Chicago, shows how economists can learn from experiments and other data about how to level the playing field for children growing up poor. Predistribution policies. Examples. You have seen in this unit policies focused on providing free, high-quality primary education for all children, eliminating ethnic, racial, or gender discrimination, raising the minimum wage, increasing bargaining power of unions through trade unions, and eliminating segmentation of markets can reduce income inequalities. Redistribution policies. Welfare state has policies that turn market income into final income. Policies are usually a combination of 1. Taxation and 2. Expenditure, i.e. in-kind transfers, free subsidized services, or social insurance targeted at specific groups. Progressive policies directly reduce inequality. Regressive policies directly increase inequality. Example, in Mexico, expenditures are more progressive than taxes. Chart shows distribution of taxation and public spending as a share of market income. Deciles of households ordered by per capita net market income, Mexico 2014. Figure shows clearly in Mexico expenditures are more progressive than taxes, while richer households tend to pay a slightly larger share of income in taxes than poorer households. Public expenditures are a much larger share of income for poorer households than richer households. Explaining trends in income inequality. Declining within country inequality 1920 to 1980. Three factors can explain this trend. A. Increasing education and productivity reduced unemployment. B. Reduced labor market segmentation and other sources of inequality among workers. And C. Technological improvements that were complementary to low and middle skilled workers. Stable or rising within country inequality 1980 to 2017. Two factors can explain this trend. 1. Increases in inequality among workers due to new technologies that were A. complementary to the skills of higher paid workers, and B. substitutes for workers doing routine tasks. 2. Weaker trade unions. Stable or decreasing between country inequality 1995 to 2017. Contributing cause is reduced global labor market segmentation due to rapid growth of labor productivity and demand in China and other poorer countries. Inequality and economic growth. The graph labeled rich countries shows that countries differ a lot in how equal their living standards are, and that the growth in productivity, GDP per capita, seems unrelated to the level of equality. There have also been high and low performers among the catch-up countries. Figure shows that South Korea and Taiwan were able to achieve high growth with relatively low inequality over the past 30 years, whereas the performance of Latin American economies along both of these dimensions was typically much worse. Both figures are initially surprising because economists have often claimed that high taxes and transfers depress incentives for people to work hard and take the kinds of risk necessary for innovation to occur. Here we see that high taxes and transfers do not necessarily reduce incentives to work hard or innovate. Inequality and economic growth. Economic benefits of lower inequality. Cooperation and trust necessary for production of knowledge and caring services is harder to sustain with high inequality. Policies that enhance endowments of the poor improve productivity. Less guard labor needed, which diverts resources from production. Figure illustrates this last point. The US, Italy, and the UK are countries with highly unequal disposable incomes that hire 3 times as many guards, public and private security personnel, excluding armed forces, than do the more equal nations of Finland, Denmark, and Sweden. An unequal society may expend a lot of resources on protecting property rights and enforcing the rule of law. Summary. We learned in this unit that 1. Technology and institutions influence inequality directly and indirectly via differences in endowments. 2. Various types of inequality between countries, group inequality, inherited inequality. 3. Policy can reduce inequalities by affecting technology, institutions, and the distribution of endowments. 4. How equal should society be? Depends on beliefs about inequality and preferences for fairness.